Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Folks, I'm so excited about being with Thomas today because you are going to see another side of Thomas that some of us know about, but many of our new listeners don't. Thomas, today we're going to talk about the eclipse that is going to occur on Monday, the 21st, which happens to also be your birthday. And what are you going to tell us about the eclipse that is just going to be so amazing to hear?
Well, Betsy, as you know, I do this with extreme reluctance. Some people are allergic to astrology. It's against their religion. It's against all of their thoughts. But I'm going to preface it, first off. The Anonymous Patriots have a number of members who are involved with being astrologers, astrosophers, astronomers, psychics, who actually worked with President Reagan's wife through a friend of hers. And so some of the conclave of the Anonymous Patriots go way back as being advisors to top diplomats, literally even the President of the United States. It is not by, or even Merrill Lynch, one of our group is a top advisor for Merrill Lynch, one of the best earners and the best predictors of astrology's effect upon Wall Street, is profound. Everyone uses astrology. You might not know this, and so it may come as a shock to you. So I'm going to have to first preface this to say that everything that I tell you is not saying that astrology compels anyone to do anything as if you had no free will or if you were predestined. That's nonsense. Astrology is an inclination. It inclines you to do one thing or another, but you don't have to. It's like you're listening to the music, but you don't have to get up and dance. But if you're dancing, you can be aligned with the music.
But it also would show you some of the greater trends that are around us, that if we're aware of them, we might be more conscious in how we act.
Oh, certainly, Betsy. Astrology can not only give you trends, it can give you exact information at exact times of the day in relationship to your chart. But what most people think is astrology is what we used to read in the newspaper, just your sun sign astrology, which is a very cheap shot. What you need to do is have your chart drawn up, and then you know exactly where the planets were at the time of your birth. So in a while, we're going to be talking about Trump and his astrological configurations at the time of his birth and the way that relates to the eclipse that's coming up. And the reason we need to talk about the eclipse is tremendous misunderstanding by astrologers and by scientists and basically most people. The Millennial Report and Cosmic Convergence did nice articles on it recently that showed that, in fact, you shouldn't be out underneath an eclipse. And there's very, very good reasons for that. And I'm going to share some of my personal experiences about that. But as I'm going along with this apology for astrology, let me also say I'm not a true astrologer, but there are members of our group who are some of the best astrologers in the world, some of the best predictive astrologers who, in fact, have the best record of making predictions. So for many, many years, decades, we have all worked together, and we have helped behind the scenes in many different ways. We've just turned to geopolitics now because Trump needs help, and his astrological chart in relationship to this very problematic eclipse is something that we need to bring to the attention of many people. That is the only reason that I am coming out as a spokesperson for these other very good astrologers in the Anonymous Patriot group that have informed me about their opinion about these circumstances. And yes, Betsy, my birthday is exactly on August 21st.
Yes, I know it is. And I want to say to our listeners that when Thomas says that there are other astrologers behind us here, there are, and they are pretty amazing. But not everyone has the ability to so eloquently describe and tell the story as Thomas does. So he's agreed to kind of roll up all of their thoughts and put them together in this presentation. So if you're listening to us and you're one of our contributors, thanks so much.
The Anonymous Patriots Conclave members are astrosophers. They're one step beyond astrology. Let me explain something about astrology. Tropical astrology is one form of astrology that is not actually aligned with the stars, with astronomy. Then there's sidereal astrology, which is directly aligned with where the stars are in the sky in relationship to now, not in relationship to the way that it was set up a long time ago as the tropical 12 signs. The 12 signs sidereally, with the backdrop of the starry world, is quite different than tropically. And then there's a third form of astrology, and arguably other forms, but particularly heliocentric. So when we're talking about an eclipse, we're talking about a merging of all of these things. We're talking about what sun sign it is in, what stars are there, and particularly in, for instance, with Trump's chart, how it affects your particular chart, and also what is called heliocentric astrology. So I'm going to be mixing some of those together. And if an astrologer doesn't know about these three different forms of astrology, then they can't possibly give you a good reading, to be quite frank with you. You need to have a bigger perspective. This isn't the limited, cheap astrology that you get from people who are just trying to figure out your sun signs to see who you're compatible with and to find your soulmate. No, these are very real things, and I can assure you that the deep state uses astrology every single step of the way. Everything is timed. For instance, let's get into these eclipses. Generally, the good form of an eclipse is when a lunar eclipse, then when a solar eclipse is followed by a lunar eclipse. Because you can imagine, when the moon, which is the exact perfect size to completely blot out the sun, but you can only have that experienced when you're in the path of a total 0-degree solar eclipse. Now, when you do have that, the moon fits exactly over the sun. Isn't that a convenience? That's just a wonderful thing that the cosmology that we have around us is so perfectly tuned and in a way in complete harmony with one another. So every once in a while you get a total eclipse of the sun where you can see it 0 degrees. In fact, what is talked about is the path that is going across all of America from Washington all the way to the eastern seaboard. So when that happens and you're right in the middle of that path, I'll describe the phenomena, which has been described down through history for thousands of years as an inauspicious, in other words, a very bad thing to witness. Now, the question would be, is it good for you or is it good for the other person? Because they always say eclipses determine who the ruler is going to be, who's going to win the battle. So let's put it in perspective. Is Trump or is the deep state going to win the battle according to this eclipse? Does this eclipse have some foreboding about the battle between Trump and the deep state? Yes, it certainly does. It certainly does. But now, in the old days, if you were an astrologer, astronomer, whatever you wanted to call yourself, and you could predict ahead of time a full eclipse right before a battle, you'd probably find that there were astrologers on both sides saying that that king was going to win the day. So generally, it depends on whose side you're on, whether or not you see an eclipse as a good or a bad thing. But much more specific, just like with tropical astrology, you may be a Leo, like I am, August 21st, but perhaps I don't have a lot of other planets in the sun sign of Leo. So I may not be a really strong Leo. Maybe I have 6 planets in Aquarius. So I may act more like an Aquarian. You have to look at the exact moment of your birth where you cannot tell what this eclipse is going to do for you. In general, you do not want to be underneath an eclipse, not just for the idea that you could burn your eyeballs out, you could become blind, you could also become mad. Let me just first tell you what a full 0-degree eclipse looks like. Not too many years ago, I was on the big island of Hawaii, and I was on top of the mountain with a perfectly clear day during an exact 0-degree solar eclipse right over the big island of Hawaii, what's called Hawaii, or they call it the Big Island when you live there. So I got to see it happen, and I could look out into the ocean in all directions as it happened. And so the swath of darkness fell over the big island in the most profound way. And it was great because that's also where there's a great solar observatory, one of the best in the world. So we had gone up the mountain and we were there and we're all partying. Everybody's happy. You're all cheery. And then all of a sudden, the full eclipse of the sun comes. 100% hush. Not a word. Barely a breath. Barely a heartbeat. Full living darkness comes upon you. You, for a few moments, see stars in the pathway above you. If you look to the sky, you see the stars in a swath of the sky. You do not see the stars outside of that swath. So it's like two curtains that are holding the living darkness just inside of this pathway. You directly meet living darkness. Now, you can get into all the spiritual ramifications of this, but basically what they say is it's kind of twofold. When the moon, even in a general eclipse, gets in front of the sun, the moon's elemental beings, the moon's forces kind of, as they say, jump to the earth and run around until the solar eclipse comes. Because generally there's a lunar eclipse, 2 weeks later there's a solar eclipse. So for 2 weeks, people have noticed, particularly psychics, that these elemental beings of the moon come down and they run around, they reap havoc, but they're nothing malicious, they're just little elemental beings. And they do their thing for 2 weeks, they jump back to the moon when it's reversed. So from solar to lunar. So at a solar eclipse, because the moon is closer to the earth and blocks out the sun, these little beings jump to the earth. So at the solar eclipse, that happens. But 2 weeks later at a lunar eclipse, they jump back to the moon. So this is well noted for thousands and thousands of years. There's prayers and meditations, there's fasting, there's food you have to eat, so on and so forth. There is a plethora of spiritual practices to use during those 2 weeks. Now, people don't understand. There's usually 4 or 5 or more or less lunar and solar eclipses in a year. This isn't a one time in a year event. This happens all the time. It just is a question of whether or not it's a perfect solar eclipse and you're in a 0 degree path, or if it's a perfect lunar eclipse, which are rare. So those are the ones that we get all excited about, and we tend to think that, there's years and years between solar and lunar eclipses. No, there's not. The moon and the sun's path and the ecliptic cross each other generally a couple times a year. So what we have now, at the beginning of this year, we've already had a solar and a lunar eclipse, the regular cycle, and now we just had a lunar on the 2 weeks ago before August 22nd, and then on August 22nd we're going to have a solar eclipse. So we have the reverse of what is considered to be the better of the types of lunar solar eclipse exchanges that happen in a general year.
Let me ask you this. You say it's not good to be under an eclipse. I would imagine, of course, people know not to look at it directly, and if they are, they're wearing special glasses. But why are you saying energetically that you shouldn't be under the path of the eclipse?
Because the moon rules. But the moon doesn't rule as it usually does when it comes into a new moon state once a month, where it doesn't cross the sun's in front of the sun and block out the sun. It goes above or below upon this path that create the nodes of the moon. So what is really happening is the moon rules. The sun is blocked out, but the moon isn't a full moon, but it's a full moon that's blocking out the sun, something that you've never really in your psyche experienced before.
And so what would this do to someone emotionally or spiritually?
Well, you become a lunatic for a couple weeks.
Luna being the moon.
And a tick being an insect. These elemental beings that jump to the earth are like insects. And yes, you can become a lunatic for a couple weeks.
Can the deep state take advantage of all this detrimental or negative energy that might be released during this time?
They absolutely will, and they plan on it, and this is something that the military is very well aware of.
Well, can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yes, but let's stay a little bit more on the surface here for a second so people understand, and you can ask questions, because these are very big issues. There are people who don't understand the phases of the moon. They don't understand that the moon joins with the sun once a month and is opposed to the sun once a month, and that's the full moon. They don't get the cycles of the moon. They don't get the fact that the moon and the sun aren't on the same cycle. So when these things happen, especially if you were a common person and you didn't understand astronomy, you could be terrified. And so when you have this experience and you're out there drinking your beer and you're taking shots of vodka and you've taken all the pharmaceutical meds you can and you're taking some acid, don't be surprised if for quite a long time until January the 31st, you may be a little bit messed up, because we don't have a lunar eclipse happening after this solar eclipse on the 21st until January 31st. And then next year, we have 3 solar eclipses, 2 lunar eclipses, and they're not in the standard order. So for the 2017, from the time we had the lunar eclipse a few days ago until the end of 2018, we're going to have some odd exchanges between the sun and the moon. But this isn't necessarily bad, which I'll go into in just a minute. But when we're talking about the beings that jump from the moon down to the earth, at that moment, the sun's light that was supposed to come to the earth. And remember, everything about us is sunlight. There's nothing on this planet, and there's nothing in us. Our thoughts are even reflected sunlight that have been turned into this Plato's cave inside of our mind. We are sunlight. So when that sun gets blotted out before your eyes and you're having a party, instead of being in darkness, in prayer and meditation, as so many people throughout the world are planning to do on that day, which is the right thing to do, and to pray for our presidents and our leaders, and to pray for the earth, and to pray for particularly the end of the deep state, because what I'm about to tell you today is that the configuration of the planets at the moment of the eclipse is extraordinarily important in this particular eclipse. Matter of fact, it can be considered one of the more important eclipses of any of our lifetimes, each of our lifetimes. So throughout your whole life, this is probably, as an American, going to be the most powerful eclipse. But in 7 years, there's going to be another one, and it's going to crisscross America again. And where the two crossing patterns happen, at the base of Illinois, Missouri, and Kentucky and Tennessee, where they come together, that is the spot, Paducah, Kentucky. If you really want to watch the elemental beings that are going to happen, keep an eye on that particular area, because that will be demarcated as a real spot for evil to come into the earth in America. And you'd think, what evil could happen out there in the country where there's hardly any cities or anything? Well, I'm not sure, but keep your eye on it. In 7 years, we will see a tremendous thing happen. We won't see it this time. What we're going to see this time is something I'm going to describe in a minute. But let's also look at what is the spiritual effect when there's a solar eclipse 0 degrees and you're watching it. All of your spiritual deeds go rushing out to the sun, because the cord between the sun and the earth, which they now know does exist, there is a cord with 5 tunnels or 5 tubes inside of it that literally connect the sun to the earth, and we are pulled behind the sun. That cord gets disrupted under 0 degrees, particularly in the area that you're in, because it affects the way that the electromagnetic forces roll across the earth from the equator north and from the equator south. I could get into that in great detail, but I'm not going to. It's too scientific.
Well, we have written some articles about it if anyone wants to go to our site and look it up, but continue on.
What is happening is a very profound effect. And that profound effect gives someone who's conscious a chance to let all of their good deeds really ray out into the full starlight, because you're standing in total darkness at this, what is called spiritually the sun at midnight, because the sun appears to be out, but it appears to be midnight. And so you literally are having a physical aspect of the sun at midnight. Now, if you've lived up in Alaska like I have, you understand what that means, the sun at midnight. But unless you've lived up there, the experience is so shocking when you have it for the first time, because it comes so quickly and leaves so quickly, that most people are left with their jaw hanging open in absolute silence, shivering, cold, and in a state of terror. I witnessed this and talked to thousands of people who are in the 0 degree line, both in Hawaii and in other places. And the people who are obsessed with seeing this literally become demoniacally possessed. There are people who will never, ever not be in the direct 0 degree line of a solar eclipse when they happen, because they are possessed by that moment. And that moment is more powerful than even seeing the aurora borealis at its greatest extreme. It's more powerful than anything that one can experience, even witnessing ball lightning right in front of you, or fantastic lightning storms. No, none of that compares with what you will experience standing in that line. I recommend people go into their prayer room, go to their altar, and pray throughout that whole day. And if you can, fast, and take all your good deeds, and you will be able to, at that moment, send them further than you usually can, depending upon the level of spiritual development that you have.
They say that period of time would be about 15 minutes. I know you say that you could spend the whole day in spiritual contemplation, but just to note that for the listeners.
Yes, and it goes by very quickly, and the exact degree will depend upon whether you are in the exact 0 degree path.
I know you have so much to say on this, but go back because you were talking about the chaos it seems to be associated with this experience. And you see articles where people are going to be going to the strip where the eclipse is taking place, and cities are getting ready. They have the military called in, or their police on standby. I mean, you see a lot of this malicious stuff seeming to happen to here, and it makes me wonder if the deep state isn't using this opportunity to perhaps do something that we're not expecting.
Oh, the deep state intends to set fire to the world.
And that would be
eclipse.
Okay, so let's get there.
Trump is the phoenix. He loves the fire. The closer people get with their wood to throw on the fire to burn up Trump, they get burnt. They run away being burnt up. That's what happens. Trump is the phoenix. It is time. He is the bird that loves the fire. So let me just point out that on the day of the eclipse, now for those of you who are astrologers, this will mean something. For those of you who are not astrologers, this will just seem like a bunch of gobbledygook. But because some people are very concerned about this, and I have not seen anyone hardly at all on the internet address these issues, only a few of my compatriots are addressing these issues, and they need to be looked at very seriously. At the moment of the eclipse, we have not only a grand trine in fire signs at that moment, so you have the planet Uranus is trining Saturn, and Saturn is trining the North Node. So, a grand trine in fire signs, that North Node is at 23 degrees Leo. A grand trine in fire signs? That's the best aspect you could get for somebody who this eclipse is personal to them, and it is absolutely personal to Trump. This eclipse is exactly to the degree on what is called Trump's ascendant. The ascendant is the part of your chart that shows the exact moment of your birth. Trump is being born anew. He's leaving behind, but that's what many of us who voted for him believed when we voted for him, that he was a truth teller. He was base. He was egotistic. He thinks he's some kind of capitalistic royalty reincarnated. He has no impulse control. He simply blurts out the truth, whether he likes it or not. This is who we got, folks, and this is what we want. And his Mars, the thing that controls speech and action and the way people perceive him sexually, that is directly on his ascendant, which is his physical body. The ascendant represents his physical body. So this eclipse is happening directly on Trump's physical body. This normally would probably shatter a normal person, but he's at the age, and his chart, which we've looked at quite thoroughly, and we always keep trying to find any problems with Trump's chart. The only problem with Trump's chart is right now there's going to be an eclipse at just 2 degrees off of his Mars. Again, which is Mars is 2 degrees off of his ascendant. Eclipse is on his, basically, Mars, which is on his ascendant. So they're conjunct, both of them, basically. That Mars in his natal chart, in Trump's personal chart, the moment of his birth, is not afflicted. It's not a problem. Matter of fact, I can't even find a negative aspect in Trump's chart. Not now, not just before the election, and not for a few years. So he's actually got no affliction, and this eclipse is happening on his chart. Now, an eclipse, if it happens on your chart and it affects aspects of your chart directly, then the eclipse isn't one day, it's all year. Should Trump, too, take our advice and stay out of the path? Absolutely.
I was just going to ask you that. Should he go into a place of contemplation, putting his spiritual deeds at the altar of the spiritual world?
He should be praying. He doesn't need to go to his bunker. Will there be assassination attempts on his life? Yes, if there is a day out of the year that there will be possibilities of that, it is certainly that day. Should he hide away? No. Should he be in the White House, be protected? Yes. Will the White House be attacked? No. This is not happening in the way that people think. This is a good thing for his chart. And just a few moments from now, after that, within a few months, then Mars is going to come to the exact position and cross that eclipse point. Well, that's going to be the only aspect that he has to deal with in that whole year with this. And for people who understand eclipses, and almost no astrologer understands eclipses, let me tell you that. 99% of them do not understand what I'm telling you, and neither do I. I'm telling you what the experts tell me. Not because I understand it, but because I, as a psychic astrologer, always use these principles, though I might not be able to mathematically tell you the exact percentage delineation between the north and south node of the moon. I can still tell you that the north node of the moon, which is in the grand trine, which is all in fire signs, means Trump is going to start making connections with the right people. He's going to start to get the right people around him. So if there's any negative thing to say about Trump's chart, it's this. He did not have the right people around him. After this eclipse, he will. But in this chart of the eclipse day, there is a T-square. There are, in fact, 4 squares happening that day and 1 opposition. And the opposition in one of the squares makes a T-square. That means that's not so good. That means that people are going to be calling Trump names. They're going to be assaulting him. They're going to be accusing him of everything humanly possible.
Well, that's going on right now as we speak.
That's why it does not affect him. The more they do it, the more they show who they are.
Yes.
The more the deep state calls their own selves out by accident, by throwing the wood onto the fire, trying to burn up the phoenix, thinking the phoenix is going to burn. They get burnt themselves because they get too close to the fire. That's what's happening, in my personal opinion, in the opinion of some of our conclave. So, will there be difficulties? Oh my gosh, we can tell you the difficulties there's going to be. There's going to be challenges in their economy. There's going to be challenges in trade. I'm looking at it right now, and I'm telling you this off the top of my head. Why? Neptune is going to be opposed to the sun. Okay, that means the America as a whole is going to be tried, people are going to try to undermine it. The very nemesis of America is attempting to undermine America at this moment. Pluto is squaring Jupiter. That means people are threatening our trade. They're threatening our currency. They're threatening our stock market. And there's inside people doing this. So it's an inside job.
Now, that chart that you're looking at, is that America's chart or is that Trump's chart?
I'm looking at the eclipse chart and telling you how it affects America.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because I think we'll try to post that online so people see what you were looking at.
And then Uranus is square Venus. So there's going to be some ruffling of feathers with females. Anybody who is a snowflake is going to get their feathers ruffled. Matter of fact, the problem is all these ruffled feathers are going to show who that bird really is.
You're associating being a snowflake with being a female? What's up with that, Thomas?
No. Weak-willed people, because this is Uranus square Venus. That's all the negative aspects of the side that is connected to the, unfortunately, I see what you're saying, but it's to the feminine. Everyone has feminine in them.
That's fine.
A man has a female etheric body, so right. I am more feminine than some women.
I understand.
The point is Uranus
females.
square. I get your point too.
Okay.
I said that a little funny. Uranus square Venus is going to mean there's going to be problems. There's going to be nights. Trump might have to sleep alone a couple nights. Yes. Oh, that's right. Sometimes he's separated from Melania and his family because of his work. So for his chart, but really that doesn't affect him so much. But in terms of everybody, I'm telling you what's happening to America and happening to everybody. And when when Neptune is opposed to the sun like it is at that moment, lies being perpetrated is the truth. And they will show themselves for who they are, because they will be poorly constructed lies, because Neptune is also square Saturn. They're not going to get their details together, and the old guard is coming undone. Matter of fact, the very nemesis, they appointed their strongest old guard deep state warriors. Oh, now they're becoming exposed. Oh, now that exposes the whole thing. That's what's going on. Now, if we're talking about Trump, this is the prediction that some of us have come up with.
No, let me ask you before you get into the prediction. Okay. So back in the day, I understand it that Nancy Reagan would contact your mutual contact, and they would ask, about certain days that Reagan wanted to roll things out, and you would look at your charts. Is that how that worked? And then you would help select the best days for his announcements, or?
Well, it was actually much, much more than that.
Yes,
we worked with the individual who gave him the largest amount of money. And
oh, you're going to tell the story about the border?
No.
Oh, that's such a good story.
I
know you can't tell everything, but
these people have to die. Now, recently they have died. Some of them have died, so I can tell you part of the story.
Okay.
At Nancy Reagan's death, you heard her son step up to the podium and say, "My dad had Alzheimer's thoroughly from his second year on." In other words, the supposed greatest president of America was incapacitated for the last 6 years, and he was reelected. Why? Because he was an actor. He memorized what they put in front of him. Nancy Reagan ran the White House for 6 years. But
I bet George Bush didn't like that.
George Bush, after 2 years in the assassination attempt, right after the assassination attempt, which of course we know was a friend of George Bush's family, he became first vice president ever in charge of all foreign policy. That is why the Vulcans overthrew the USSR. At Nancy's funeral, her son told the world the truth. Hardly anyone has now addressed that truth. She needed great help, but these helpers of hers, her best girlfriend, let us say, not only connected her to us, but to also a few famous astrologers in Hollywood, but they're not predictive astrologers, and they don't do geopolitical. They do personal. So she was actually reaching one of the best predictive astrologers, who is a very good friend of this woman whose family provided more money to Republicans than you can shake a stick at, and particularly Ronald Reagan, and actually sculpted and formed his political career. Because let's remember, he was the first one to show that major leadership positions as governors and senators and the President of the United States is a Hollywood production. It is a personality contest, nothing more. You can say whatever you want. It doesn't matter. You don't have to fulfill on any of your words. You simply spout the party's planks, and you try to avoid anything confrontational, and you simply run a Walt Disney-produced, Hollywood-produced production. That is what it was.
So Reagan had Alzheimer's, but because he was a good actor, he was doing a great job, and Nancy was behind him, helping, forming, creating. What was she doing? And also consulting with your group?
And George Bush was running pretty much the whole show. George Bush, who had been the head of the CIA. Nancy was terrified that people would discover that he had Alzheimer's. Remember, in the Iran-Contra scandal, they asked him 127 times questions, and his answer was, I don't remember. And he honestly didn't remember. He didn't remember jack. He remembered because he was a actor. He could memorize a script and go out and tell jokes with perfect comic timing. He didn't even use notes. He's like all actors. He memorizes it and forgets it right after you do it, as long as it's a take. That's what he did. She was terrified. So the White House was ran by the very man, George Bush Sr., who helped Allen Dulles assassinate John F. Kennedy. And I'm sorry if you don't know that, but look into it, you'll find it's true. And then Allen Dulles, who had just been fired by John F. Kennedy, was then put as the chairman of the Warren Commission that investigated the death of John F. Kennedy. And we know that seeing Daddy Bush was there on the steps. There are pictures of it. He was twice picked up by the CIA, the FBI that day. Once in a suit and once in hobo clothes on a train. George Bush was, in fact, running the White House. So they would call and ask us, is this a good day to do this event, that event? And so we would look at all the aspects that would affect that chart. I would look at just the chart when they end up constructing it and drawing in all the aspects, and I'd just give my hit on it, my psychic hit, personally, because at the time I was, I did that for people. I was a consultant, but I use all systems, including astrology. It doesn't matter. So I'd give my opinion, and then between two of us or more, we would then give that opinion back to her. She would give it to Nancy Reagan, and that's how they constructed his scheduling, and that's how. But we did not control the government. I'm not taking any responsibility for the evil of George Herbert Walker Bush.
But I just wanted to frame this for listeners that you've done this before. And so now when we look at Trump's chart, what you're going to be telling us about Trump's chart would be something similar to what you might have done for Nancy Reagan?
No, we were looking at protecting Reagan and protecting Nancy. And when the aspects looked so good that he would win re-election hands down in a landslide, of course they ran him again, even though everyone knew that he had Alzheimer's. But that just shows you the liars who fill our Congress, the fact that they knew the president was incapacitated. But this isn't the first time that that's happened. We've had better wives of presidents run our country than we've had, in some cases, presidents run the country. So what I'm about to predict is the following. Trump has an unafflicted chart. He has an eclipse directly on his ascendant, and it's unafflicted. He is going to lead us through an attempt. These attempts now are literally attempts at World War III, because we have the biggest open window of elemental beings jumping down to the earth. So we're talking about the elemental beings that make bombs work, that make missiles go off, that make technology work, that cyber warfare. There's going to be a lot of nonsense between now and January 31st. And during that time, 2018, and during that time, Trump will simply again and again and again rise out of the flames as a phoenix rising up. But he's not going to take off. What people might not understand about the phoenix is the following. The phoenix is on top of an obelisk. There is a little pyramid. The pyramid is at a 52.52 degree angle, which shows the angle of refraction of light coming through, say, a pyramid, a glass pyramid, and turning it into the 7 spectrum color rainbow that we're used to. That is also the message of the Great Pyramid, that light is broken into our 52 weeks of the year. It's a symbol of the resurrection, and this happens every morning at the moment of the sunrise. There is a certain thing that happens, and that is what is happening right now. It didn't even happen before now. And by the way, as you pointed out...
What do you mean before now?
With Trump.
Okay.
It did not happen before now.
All right.
We have yet to see Trump rise to his glory.
Okay.
He will not even start until August 21st. And on that day, we will see him rise up like a phoenix, and every difficulty that is thrown at him, he has nothing to give us back than what I mentioned earlier. Trump is a person who is exactly who he says he is. He is not all those accusations people make about him. Those are lies, and we've already proven that and demonstrated that again and again. If you look at him, he is exactly what he says he is. He is an egotistic, capitalistic king, a baron. He's like, one of the baron lords, capitalist baron lords of America. He's not part of the military-industrial complex. He did this all for his own ego satisfaction, and he has played the game on both sides. He's swam in the shark tank. He swims among the sharks, no problem whatsoever. He has no impulse control, and he's going to say whatever truth comes to his mind at that moment.
And I love it. I love it.
And we love that's who we elected.
Because we are so freaking tired of all this political correctness keeping us from speaking our mind.
This eclipse chart shows that he is a nuclear explosion to political correctness.
Love it.
And that is what's happening. And that's why he opens his mouth, condemns both sides of the Charlottesville attacks, because remember, both sides were armed and had weapons. Why did the police let them gather with arms and weapons?
Thomas, we did an audio in Charlottesville a while back ago. I want to stay on track. I want to talk about this. Is a marvelous thing with Trump. What can patriots do during the eclipse to help in any kind of spiritual or, emotional collective way for this transformation to occur?
Well, citizen journalists, Betsy, have been doing their job, and you and your crew at aimfortruth.org and Truth News Headlines doing a fantastic job, because you are like people who are pushing the deep state that's trying to throw the wood onto the fire to burn up Trump. As they're backing off on fire, the citizen journalists are pushing those deep state members back into the fire, so they are taken up into the conflagration of the burning of the deep state. In other words, this is the Second American Revolution. This is, as Millennial Report says so often, the purple revolution. They are attempting it. We are the counter revolution, and we are winning.
I call it, we're the red, white, and blue revolution,
That's
patriots.
right.
And each one of us can do something. You have the capacity, the talent, the skills, the voice to do something. Now, I can't tell you what that is because each of you is unique. But if you would just sit for a moment in your quiet, in your meditative, contemplative time, ask God, ask Spirit, ask whoever is that creator of yours to whisper in your voice to let you know what you can do, and then get your butt in gear and get it done.
Don't be like the guppies who were taken advantage of on both sides of the Charlottesville activity. Some of those were paid agitators by George Soros through Antifa and through Black Lives Matter. A lot of them are guppies. Innocent people going out to say they support some ideal that they don't understand. They don't understand even the nature that both of those organizations are domestic terrorist organizations. On the other hand, who could be a more domestic terrorist than the KKK and the people who just wish to kill people because they aren't the right color? But remember, the man who led and created the whole thing for Unite Right was also one of the leaders of Occupy Wall Street, which was a democratic thing. He is nothing more than a paid agitator. That was a fake attack on Trump. That was set up. These riots and these complaints and demonstrations have already been happening around that statue for quite some time. Terry McAuliffe did nothing, and the city mayor did nothing. Don't be like those people. Do not think that going out into the street with your legal gun to make your protest and then you confront Black Lives Matter and then somebody gets hurt. That is not the way to do this. We don't need to go out and protest. We have a duly elected president. It is complete nonsense. Let them get arrested. Let them go out and do whatever they're going to do. They've already been defined. Black Lives Matter has already been defined as a terrorist organization. Antifa has been defined as a terrorist organization. They will be closed down. Do not go out into the streets. And this is what people think should happen, is that they get all fiery hot and red and angry because there's this triple fire sign activity happening on the 21st, and they want to see some action. They want to stand up to these people who've been attacking Trumpites. No, that isn't how you stand up to them. Here's the answer to Betsy's question. Go out and put your money where your mouth is. Create a lawsuit. Join lawsuits. Support lawsuits. Support people like Judicial Watch who are creating lawsuit after lawsuit. That is the way we're going to win this. Mm-hmm. It is lawfulness, not the unlawfulness of the White House, rogue CIA White House that was started with Daddy Bush Sr. and has continued right on through to Obama and was supposed to continue with Hillary Clinton. That is not what we want. We need to have truthfulness, and the executive branch needs to be restored. So you have to support Trump, but you don't need to do it violently, and you don't even need to do it vocally. We are the winners. We need to claim our victory. And Trump, if you hear this, or if someone hears this and can talk to him, stay indoors that day, stay indoors the day before and the day after, and stay in a secure place and look after your family. Keep your family close to you. There are negative aspects that come with an eclipse, but he is not negatively aspect. I haven't looked at his other, and none of us have looked at his rest of his family members, but we can tell you that when something like this happens, you just need to be grateful. We are very, very grateful here at the Anonymous Patriots from what it is that we see, because people are stepping up. They're putting their money where their mouth is. They're suing the DNC for the illegal primaries between Clinton and Bernie. Debbie Wasserman Schultz has been called out again and again. The Alwan brothers on the run. We now know it's the largest espionage scandal being covered up by the Congress itself. We see all of these things coming unraveled in the deep state. Hang in there, people. Do not believe for 1 second the news. We know news sites that just within the last few days since the attack started by Terry McAuliffe, who wanted to be president, by the way, who is politically aligned with Andrew McCabe's wife and the illegal super PAC money coming through Clinton. Terry McAuliffe is a Clinton stooge. I want to point out one thing. His chief of staff was there and instantaneously stepped up to the microphone to be the spokesperson for that day.
Well, that's any good false flag. There's somebody there to give the narrative.
And there's no helicopter images of what really happened that day. Isn't that strange? That's what they always, the false flags are always proven by the helicopter images, which do not verify the ground story. So he knew this was going to happen. The mayor knew it was going to happen. People don't understand. There were 3 permits granted that day. 2 of those groups want to kill the other group. Why would you allow that to happen? And then we talked extensively about it.
They wanted it to happen, and they probably set it up. Y'all come on now. Let's get your permits, everybody. This is going to be a circus.
Do not be discouraged by the negativity you see, even in what looks like alt-right news. And especially, do not be discouraged between now to January 31st. At January 31st,
of 2018.
2018, there will probably be some people who will suffer and have to go to jail for what is going to come out between the eclipse, August 21st, and January 31st. So that's what we had to say. It's a good thing. It's a good thing for Trump. It's a good thing for America. More people are uniting to pray for Trump on that day than probably ever before. And we're talking worldwide, because now people are loving Trump worldwide. You're not hearing that in the press, in American press, but you're hearing it all over the world. And also, you just got through hearing Putin say that George Soros and the Rothschilds were kicked out of Russia because they were trying to mess with his election. And that he said it's happening in America. The George Soros funded 184 funded GNOs that are, in fact, causing these people to be paid, these agitators to be paid. That this is an attempt to undo the legitimacy of the election. But it's not going to be undone. Because if they look close into the election, they'd find out the election fraud. What have we already found out? 3.5 million people fraudulently on the election rolls for that day. And that's with only 17 states reporting. So what Trump said, there's millions of people who voted that day who shouldn't have, that was a very low number compared to the reality. So these kind of things are coming out every single day. So what I suggest is that if you want to overcome evil, you overcome it with love. And if you want to overcome the kind of negativity that you see coming out of the deep state, you meet it with gratitude. We should be so grateful that Trump and his family have put their life and their businesses all on the line so that they could defeat Hillary Clinton and the rogue CIA White House.